Solo mining is the embodiment of the original dream, a defiant act of individual sovereignty where one person, one node, and one miner take a stand against centralized control. We don't just mine for profit, we mine for principle. We mine for ourselves and for each other and for the unyielding spirit at Bitcoin's core. Join us as we dig in and hold the line. This is the Home Mining Podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Home Mining Podcast. I'm your host, TwoSats, and I'm joined today by the master of wild sats, the co-founder and CEO of Saz Mining, Mr. Kent Halliburton. How are you doing, Kent?
Excellent, TwoSats. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us all the way from Peru. Love what you're doing over there in your business with Saz Mining, and really excited to deep dive on, the broader intellectual and philosophical implications of Bitcoin, Bitcoin mining, and how you guys approach it differently.
Yeah, no, I think I've learned a lot in the 4 years I've been in mining, and I think that, bringing more of a Bitcoin focused perspective into mining is really important. There's a lot of folks that are in mining to stack fiat and not Bitcoin, and that leads to some different conclusions about mining.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion because of that, and that's a good differentiation to start on and to dig into, because we want Bitcoin mining businesses to be Bitcoin centric, not just fiat profit maximalists, right? And you started in solar, if I'm not mistaken, and had a very successful career in renewable energy, led sales and business development for a publicly traded solar company. And I was wondering, what was the pivotal moment or insights for you that pulled you down the Bitcoin rabbit hole? And how did your experience in solar shape your vision for sustainable Bitcoin mining with Saz?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and appreciate that you've done your research. So a lot of asymmetric knowledge I think I've been able to pull through from my decade in rooftop solar, and just starting at a really high level. It actually took me a while to realize just how analogous rooftop solar was to Bitcoin mining. So let me just give you a few properties to help the audience out here a little bit. So it's rooftop solar is also decentralized, it's distributed, it's disruptive to the utility. It is emergent in the same way Bitcoin is, and your primary product is being imported from China. So all of those similarities, meant that coming into the mining sector sort of, I feel like, gave me a fast forward to how our industry was going to emerge to a degree. So those are some of the insights, but I have a computer engineering background, so the combination of computer engineering with a focus on networking and the renewable background, so understanding energy a bit, meant that when I discovered Bitcoin in 2015, sitting in the Sacred Valley of in Peru, I had time on my hands, and I just kept looking at it and staring at it and trying to understand it. It took me quite a while, I have to admit, before I bought my first Bitcoin, but I could see the value and could get the pieces put together because of that background.
So it wasn't too abstract to you. It just took some time to piece it all together. So how did you first hear about Bitcoin then?
So I actually was working in the Bay Area, and I remember hearing about Bitcoin circa 2011, 2012. I mean, I was in Silicon Valley, doing rooftop solar, so not like the high-tech work, but I had heard about it. And then in 2015, I just had time on my hands. There was a period of time where I was just living in the Sacred Valley in Peru. I had rented a house with a couple other folks that were travelers as well for a couple months, and I was just following my nose down different rabbit holes on the internet, and came across Bitcoin, and it intrigued me. And as I mentioned, just the background that I had, I think I was more predisposed to understand it because of some previous experiences in life.
And when did mining come into your consciousness from that point on? Like, you started thinking about Bitcoin, it made sense, you bought some. When did mining kind of make its way into your life?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I had an aborted trial with mining at my home in Portugal. So 2016, life restarted for me in Portugal, and become, starting a family, living the American dream, just in Portugal. And while I was there, there was like a one mine, I think was the name of it, just some unit that I could plug into the wall, and it was supposed to generate Bitcoin. And so I played with that, and I didn't have a very good experience. And I just really was like, why can't I just go online and have like mining as a service? Like, why doesn't that exist? And so that's what we've spent some time building here at Saz Mining as a result. But I would say mining, to really answer your question, it was Jeff Booth's The Price of Tomorrow. Reading that in 2019, there's a chapter in there, chapter 5, I still remember to this day, talks about solar and mining, and how there's an explosion coming up when those two intersect. And I could see it given my solar career, and it was like, mining is where I need to be in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Because from 2016 to 19, I read his book in 2020. I take that back, because it's 2021 that I started helping Saz Mining. So from like 2016 till 2020, I tried my hand at a variety of different things in the Bitcoin ecosystem. Failed trading attempts, the mining from home, Bitcoin ATMs. Red tape in Portugal is just horrible, and nothing really got off the ground. And so reading Jeff Booth's The Price of Tomorrow is what led me to actually shift gears and say mining is the place I belong, because I was just deeply passionate about Bitcoin, for all the reasons I think most of us are, and wanted to put my shoulder against the wheel and help this movement, help drive adoption.
That's an interesting tidbit about Portugal. I didn't know that there was a lot of red tape there, because a lot of people kind of hail it as like a crypto haven, at least from a tax perspective. So I would have assumed that it was a little bit more in line with innovation, but interesting to know that it's not. And, Jeff Booth is incredible. So I'm glad to hear that Jeff Booth was sort of the one that helped you kind of dive into where you're at now, because he does talk a lot about, putting your energy into Bitcoin and seeing what you can do for Bitcoin. And that's one of my favorite parts about Jeff's, pitch in general about Bitcoin is, stop putting your time and energy into things and using Bitcoin on the side, right? Like, go all in and see where you can really contribute. And obviously that's made a huge, profound impact in your future and in your life.
That's 100% right. And, I think one of the most inspirational quotes for me is one by Buckminster Fuller, and I inevitably will butcher it, but it's, you don't fight the existing system, just build a better one, and people naturally migrate. And I believe that's what we're doing here in Bitcoin. And actually I think that in a big way, Jeff is sort of expounded on that idea by saying, folks, just go all in, quit trying to feed the existing Leviathan, and work on building a better, brighter future. And I very much believe in that.
Yes, yeah, you and I both. I love Jeff. A lot of respect for him. He's opened my eyes in so many ways, and is by and large responsible for me starting podcasts and doing what I do as well. So a lot of love for Jeff. And sort of in line with that, he's kind of talking about Bitcoin is a mirror of human values in a way, right? And mining consumes vast amounts of energy to secure a decentralized ledger. Some call it wasteful, others call it a testament to the human ingenuity. Do you think mining reflects something fundamental about our species, like our drive to create order from chaos, or our willingness to trade our resources for freedom?
Oh boy, I've never thought about it in that framing. So I would need to, I think, probably sit on that for a little while. But I'll address it from a different angle, and it's actually a very simple idea, but I find very few people, even in the Bitcoin ecosystem, have fully wrapped their heads around it, which is a mining investment is the only way to generate Bitcoin. And it doesn't sound like much, but when you think about it, it's a 0-to-1 innovation in the exact same way that Bitcoin itself is a 0-to-1 innovation. And because of that, you have to build from first principles off of that fact, right? Like, there's no other investment that you make that will generate an alternative form of currency or money, right? This digital money. I mean, you could say, yeah, I'm going to go invest in a gold mine and maybe it'll generate gold for me, but this this confuses a lot of people, and leads them to the idea that that when they invest in Bitcoin mining, they're putting dollars into a Bitcoin mining investment, and through the work of their mining hardware, they're going to get Bitcoin out, but they're going to denominate it in dollars. So they look at it from an ROI standpoint. And I think that's a fundamental mistake. The right way to look at this is as a way to use your capital that you've worked for, to, in the same way that you would take that capital and go put it on an exchange, and dollar cost averaging is the consensus way to acquire your Bitcoin. But in the same way, you buy your mining hardware, and over the next 3 years of its useful life, you're dollar cost averaging into a Bitcoin position for the next 3 years. So don't sell your Bitcoin to pay for the electricity. Simply use it all as a way to acquire Bitcoin, and make it very simple for folks. So I do think that we are hardwired as a species to work and value money that is based on work. I do agree with that. I think it's actually why, since 1970s, when fiat has become divorced from the laws of physics, with the Nixon shock that separated, the convertibility of dollars into gold, that our society and our species has frankly become quite unmoored from its foundations. It's because money is no longer tied to reality, and I think that when money is not tied to reality, we become untethered from reality as a result. Just the social fabric stops functioning and breaks down with the moral hazard that's introduced by fiat currency.
Yeah, and you nailed it. And Bitcoin is proof of work, right? And Bitcoin mining is proof of work. So you're turning your hard spent energy and time, limited time on Earth, into a better money. And whether it's DCAing Bitcoin or it's mining Bitcoin, it's converting your time and energy into something that's fundamentally a lot more sound. But why would somebody want to invest in mining as a service versus spending that same amount of money over 3 years or whatever to DCA into Bitcoin?
Well, the simple answer is you get Bitcoin at a lower price. That's the primary reason. The secondary reason is an emotional one. And the emotional reason is actually something very similar that I saw in rooftop solar. So I used to, one of my favorite parts of my job is, somebody get a rooftop solar system built on their house, and the utility has to approve turning that power generation device on the roof. And once that occurs, I love to go meet with the homeowner and turn on that system and watch them light up when they saw their meter spin backwards from the electricity being generated on the roof. Like, there was just a giddiness to every single person that had that experience. And the idea of, hey, I'm doing this myself. And a similar emotional response is that I've seen by Bitcoiners when they generate their own Bitcoin. There's just something empowering about having your own sats delivered to your wallet from your own hardware. There's just a sense of ownership, and I think that sense of ownership is critical for the future of the network itself. I think that the mining community and the Bitcoin community have largely been separated. There's a few companies like Ocean that are working to create a bridge between that. And the reason why the two communities are separated is it's an incentive issue, is what I see. And most of the mining community is focused on generating more fiat. And I think it's incumbent on us as a Bitcoin community, and part of what we're doing is to make it easy to access and easy to understand mining as a service, so that even your mother, your grandmother could jump into this and start stacking their own sats, and do so in the way that Satoshi designed the network to work. Because the more of us in the Bitcoin community that are involved with mining, the healthier the network itself will be, because we're driven by the proper incentive, which is to acquire Bitcoin, not to convert it into dollars.
Yeah, that's something we talk a lot about in the OSMU, the Open Source Miners United Discord and community, is making it so easy that your grandma could do it. And if it's not, then you're going to have a fundamental disconnect between Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. And the more I learn about Bitcoin mining through interviewing people like yourself, is these things are inextricably linked, and they're going to continue that way down, like, much longer into the future. And when you learn more about mining, you really, really come to appreciate Bitcoin that much more. It's not now just something that you're putting your fiat into and holding like your you're really learning that it's linked to nature. It's linked to the laws of the universe and physics, and it just it's so brilliant. And I think when people were mining on their CPUs and their GPUs, it didn't have that same fundamental understanding on a deeper level that we have now that we're mining with all these engineering geniuses and these people that are into renewable energy like yourselves. It really helps connect Bitcoin to Bitcoin mining. And you said something else too about it's about decentralizing the network. It's about contributing, and that helps kind of tether us to Bitcoin more. I'm running my BitAxes in the background here, and I agree. I'm not getting a huge amount of Sats. This is lottery mining, but it goes deeper, right? We're fundamentally helping contribute hash rate in a decentralized way and secure the network. Is that something that you think is interesting and important, like the home mining movement that we're seeing now?
So I think home mining is incredibly important. I'm extremely bullish. I was lucky enough to be in Denver for the Heat Summit that was there, and it was a fantastic experience. I mean, one of the highest signal events that I've ever been to for within the Bitcoin community. Learned a ton. I'm hugely bullish on monetizing heat in the home environment. I'm hugely bullish on the home mining community, this tinkering and figuring out new innovation, and I think for the masses that it is not a viable option outside of heat. I think BitAxes are a wonderful education device, but I think ultimately, if you're going to like, this is something that I learned coming from rooftop solar. It didn't matter how green people were about the energy they generated. That only made up about 10 to 20% of people's decision making. If the numbers fundamentally weren't there, people were not going to buy. And so that's why on our side at Saz Mining, we've developed a product that has the numbers are there and it's clean power driven. That way people can feel good about their investment, but the numbers are fundamentally there that you're generating Bitcoin at a lower price than an exchange. And so what I see is the heat community. I can see mining replacing a lot of like the electrical heating within a home, and so people are getting a discount on their electricity, and or generating some Sats on the side that they can save. And I see the Tinker community developing new innovation, and I see the BitAxe community serving as an important like top of funnel education that I believe that a lot of the BitAxe owners are going to actually wind up wanting to generate more Sats and looking for a service like ours eventually, to actually be able to have an opportunity to generate Sats, because the BitAxe is a wonderful education device and it's a lottery ticket. It's not really a way to cost effectively put much Bitcoin in your pocket. Now, I hope you hit your lottery bet. I hope everybody that has a BitAxe does, but the odds are not in your favor.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more solo miners hit blocks, but at the end of the day, it is, I think, best used as an education tool and something that piques people's interest because it's now something tangible, right? Exactly. It's something that they can get in their hands, they can play with, they can iterate on. It's open source. That's the beauty of it, right? It's open source. So you've got all sorts of brilliant people that can now come in and extrapolate on what was done and make it something bigger and better. And I think it's only going to accelerate in the next 5 to 10 years. And in bear markets, that's when people really build, right? So we're going to see incredible innovation, as you pointed out, in heat, and there's solar bits now, all sorts of interesting projects that do come out. But what's really interesting to me is just it starts to get people thinking about running their own nodes and mining to their own node. Like, gives them technical know-how, so they're not just buying $20 worth of Bitcoin every week, right? And they may never hit a block, but they're learning about how Bitcoin functions and how Bitcoin mining functions. And then, as you said, it really helps steer them down the path of what else is out there. And that's really how I came across Saz Mining and took an interest and started to go to your site and dig in, because I'm a nature lover, and so I love the way that you guys are kind of marketing as wild sats, and you're using energy, trapped energy from a dam that's sold to Brazil typically at a loss. And so you that's kind of revolutionary, right? You're taking that energy that's normally sold off at a loss and turning it into Bitcoin mining. And your site is extremely intuitive. It's clean. It's simple. it really helps illustrate why somebody might want to, take that next step and where they should go. And in my mind, like Saz Mining is at the top of that list for when people, myself included, want to mine as a service.
Cool. I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the kind words, and that was the intention. Is as easy, just like Netflix brought streaming as a service to the marketplace, and Airbnb brought property home share as a service. We see the same thing. There's this opportunity here with Bitcoin mining to make it as a service, so that it's intuitive to people's already. To their experience that they've already had with the internet to begin mining. And specifically, we're targeting Bitcoiners because what we found is it's only the Bitcoin community that wants to acquire Bitcoin, right? If you've not gone far enough down the rabbit hole, then you're not at a point where you're stacking Bitcoin to stack Bitcoin as a savings vehicle, right? You're still wanting to speculate on it. And so yeah, we're actually quite focused on the community, and I want to go back to something else you were talking about, the tangible nature of Bitcoin mining. I was at a 100 megawatt Bitcoin mining farm in Paraguay, and there's a moment in time that I was there. We were racking some rigs. We're going to be having some of our equipment hosted there shortly, and I was racking some rigs, and I was just suddenly overcome and just had this strong desire that everybody in the Bitcoin community could actually go just see and feel what it was like to be in a 100 megawatt Bitcoin mining farm, because the visceral experience of all that electricity being consumed in such a small place to secure this digital ledger. Like, this is a 100 megawatt Bitcoin farm. I don't know what the latest numbers are, estimates for power. Well, last I heard it was like 17 gigawatts. So we're talking 0.1 of the 0.1 gigawatts were just this farm, right? So there's 170 times that out there across the world. And it's, you see that, you feel it, and you're like, my gosh, there's reality connected to the Bitcoin I hold in my wallet. And I think the more that people understand that and feel that, the healthier we are as a society.
That sounds incredible. Yeah, it's something that the average person buying Bitcoin is so far removed from. So I think the ability to go into some of these facilities and see the innovation firsthand and feel it and realize like this is a living entity at this point, I think that's super powerful. So I want to touch on a little bit about Saz Mining's aim to make Bitcoin accessible to everyday people using renewable energy. Like, how do you see this addressing Bitcoin's sort of Achilles heel, if you will, of energy consumption? Is this for you guys about profitability, ideology, or both?
I'd say both. So we know that the lowest cost power across the grid is the power that's not being consumed, and that power that's not being consumed is either being produced at the wrong time or the wrong place. And it just so happens that most of that power is coming from renewable energy sources. And so we felt that there is a direct alignment with operational expenses and value proposition for our clients, and what we believed in, right? So it's both mission driven and profitable to focus on this particular angle. And our brand promise, so far we've been lucky and found everything 100% hydro, but our brand promise is to be 20% better than the Bitcoin network, which is about 68% carbon free power. So that's our aim, is any mining centers that we bring are at least 68% carbon free power. That way we know that our contribution is helping to pull that metric up.
So that presents like an interesting question for me, because I'm a little bit maybe ignorant on that, and maybe people watching don't know, like, what does that mean, carbon, like less carbon, and how is that produced by a traditional mining operation, and how do you fix that?
Well, yeah, so no mining operation generates carbon, right? But your power source can generate carbon, right? So you've got carbon-free power sources include nuclear, solar, wind, hydro. And there's an argument that off-grid natural gas is also carbon-free because you're mitigating methane. And actually, if you look at it from that angle, it's carbon negative. So those are the sort of energy sources that we primarily want to get. Now, if you're powering your data center for Bitcoin mining off of the grid, then you're going to be subject to the mix of energy sources that are being contributed to the grid in that location. And that's why it's often a blend if you're going grid tied for your data center.
I got you. And you guys leverage hydropower in places like Paraguay and Norway, correct?
And Wisconsin, yes.
And Wisconsin. Yep.
Yeah, those are our 3 data centers.
How do you see Bitcoin mining influencing the entire renewable energy sector? Could it become a catalyst for grid stability and energy innovation, or is it more of a symbiotic relationship?
Well, the way I look at Bitcoin mining is I actually think of it as a manufacturing process, and the manufactured good is Bitcoin. And so the framework that I use is, you've got some form of energy that needs to be harnessed, whether that's water falling, wind blowing, splitting an atom, whatever, right? Like you've got some form of energy that's harnessed. So there's the power generation. And the next step is there's got to be like a greenfield site that gets developed. So I'm talking about larger scale mining, right? Like in sort of a minimum of a couple megawatts when I talk about this. But you've got a greenfield site that needs to be developed. So you've got the power generation, then the greenfield site that needs to be developed, and usually the developer in small scale is going to wind up owning the site and operating the site. And once they've got it all developed and ready, they might have more power though than they can actually monetize, right? They might not have the capital to fill all the rack space, and then somebody like us can come in and say, hey, we'll fill up the rest of your rack space with you, and you manage the equipment alongside. And then so whoever owns the mining rigs though are the benefactor of the Bitcoin that are generated, and they end up in the wallet. So that's kind of the manufacturing process of a Bitcoin. And what I see is, coming from a rooftop solar sector, is the winning companies in that particular manufacturing process, they owned a slice of the supply chain. They didn't try to own the entire thing. But as the business scaled, they eventually began to go downstream and sort of gobble up more pieces, because as you start to own more of it, you can actually increase your margins, right? Because you're not paying somebody else to do a different part of the supply chain. So that's how I think of it, and I think it's a long-winded answer, but what I perceive is in the future you will see power generation and mining converge to try to increase margins, and other pieces will converge as well and be vertical. And I'm not convinced that now is the right time for that vertical integration. I think we're still at the point of specialization, and there's more value to owning a slice and scaling that rather than trying to vertically integrate all those pieces of the supply chain.
What do you think is lacking for now to be the right time for something like that?
Scale. I don't think that there's the professional level of acumen out there for most of the industry, or the right incentive set. So if you look by definition, the publicly traded mining companies, for instance, they've got fiduciary responsibility that is denominated in dollars to their shareholders, right? So while they've developed a lot of professional acumen and really helped to move the industry forward, their incentive structure is not aligned with the Bitcoin network, and I don't think leads to the proper outcomes or builds the correct cultures within those companies. So I think that there's that misalignment is part of why companies like us exist, right? That are working to be aligned with the Bitcoin network and bring more people in. So I'm excited to see what we can develop as we scale. I think Ocean is another company that's got that alignment with the Bitcoin network, working to decentralize the hash rate. I think a lot of the mining pools out there, are proxies for Ant Pool, right?
Yes.
And so that's clearly not aligned with the Bitcoin network, and creates some problems. I was glad to see Demand just launched. I don't know if you've been tracking that. Alejandro de Toro just launched Demand. It's the first Strata V2 pool, just launched, and they've got a wait list going right now for miners that want to sign up to mine with them. But I think that I know I'm repeating myself when I say this, but I think it's incumbent on us as a Bitcoin community to come more into the Bitcoin mining sector and to push out the fiat driven incentive set.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I think, from like the home miners community, the home mining community perspective is exactly that, right? Like these big centralized mining cartels are sort of the enemy, right, to a lot of people. And, you can see why, even in this conversation, right? It's like, if they're fiat driven and they have fiat based incentives, then they're not really there for the Bitcoin network. And we need to support those that are, which Saz is clearly a great example of that, and Ocean and some of these other companies. So I think that's where it's incumbent upon people in the Bitcoin community and that are thinking about mining or that are mining to support the right players in the game, so that we're not moving further and further away from Satoshi's vision originally, right? So is Saz a company that holds Bitcoin on their balance sheet and that stacks Bitcoin, or how does that look?
Oh, I wish we could. Most of our Bitcoin still be in fairly early stage, means we've got to sell it for operational expenses. We receive a cut of the mining reward, and once we start to scale to big enough size, then yeah, we'll have a Bitcoin treasury that we'll be managing and focused on treasury management rules, etc. And we do hold all the Bitcoin, and we try to time the market as to when we're going to actually sell it and that sort of thing. But we do have to sell it to fund our growth. I think I want to go back to something you said, and you just said about the big miners, because I think there's actually a bit of nuance to big miners. Because I think at a certain point, like, we will be looking at a size capacity that puts us there too. But I think there's a fundamental difference when you're a big miner and a single owner of all those units versus, for us, it's a fleet under management, right? So it's decentralized ownership still. And I think that's a nuance that's important for the community to understand, because decentralized ownership means that there's not a single throat to choke, right? If somebody came along, the regulator did, and said, "Hey, Kent, you got to shut down your mine," I would say, "Well, you're going to need to go get permission of all the owners of their equipment. So here's what I have for contact information. Good luck." That's a different thing than having a single owner of all the equipment. And so even though it is possible, like our biggest facility right now is just 6 megawatts, right? So we're not that big at all. But I can see in the future where we might have 10, 20, 30 megawatt farms, and managing those on behalf of clients. But I think the decentralized ownership is a fundamentally different incentive makeup than single ownership of the mining farm.
I'm glad you circled back to that and made the distinction, because I agree. Very important distinction, because when we're kind of talking negatively about giant mining corporations, the issue is centralization, not decentralization. So it's an important nuance. That you are a fleet under management. I really like how you put that, because this is thousands and thousands of owners of these machines being just managed by a company, as opposed to a centralized mining cabal or cartel, whatever you want to call it, that it has a bunch of proxies, and they're really trying to centralize all the hash rate, right? So it's an important distinction that you are sort of on the philosophically aligned with the right ethos, right, of decentralizing the network, and not what some of these other like Antpool and Foundry and whatnot are doing.
Yeah, and I don't know that we will become have major mining farms either. We're a bit opportunistic as to what rack space we're able to find, when and where, strategically. But I wouldn't rule it out either. I just think it's important to understand that the incentives are different if the ownership is distributed, not just the power centralized.
And that's something we actually talk a lot about an upside to something like home mining and BitX. It's like, are you going to go and shut down 70,000 individual BitX node runners? Like, you're not, right? There is no central person to go and choke out here, right? It's an army of plebs, so to speak, that are just running their own node, running their own BitX army. And you're not going to stop that. You're not going to go and shut down every individual miner, much like you're not going to go into your facilities and be able to choke out all these people that are running with you as a service. So very important.
Well,
And
and it's
speaking
also
of, go
it's
ahead.
also, just to add one more double click on that. It's also why we strategically chose to not just focus on the U.S. but build data centers in multiple locations, is because we wanted to mitigate jurisdictional risk, both for ourselves and for our clients. Right? It's much harder for a Norwegian entity to come along and say, "Hey, can you shut down both Norway and Paraguay?" And we say, "No, go pound sand." Right? That just doesn't work. So decentralizing the hash rate is there's multiple levels to it, I guess, is what I want to try to point out.
Yeah, I imagined that there was a good reason to not just exist in the U.S., right? That geographical freedom is very important, and the world changes a lot, right? And we don't know when or how somebody's going to come in and try to squash all of the hard work and the freedom and the sovereignty aspect of things. And that leads me into the next question, because in a recent Bitcoin news interview, you spoke about how Bitcoin it's got a lot of liberating potential. And I want to unpack that with you. How does mining fit into a broader philosophical framework like individual sovereignty or a rejection of centralized financial systems?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite parts of Bitcoin mining, because mining is the only way to generate Bitcoin. You can think of the Bitcoin that you've generated as truly the only wild Bitcoin, right? Or wild sats, as what we like to call them. And for some of our clients, those are bug house sats, right? That's their go bag if something happens in their jurisdiction, is they've got Bitcoin that's been generated to a wallet that is off grid, so to speak, because the only identifying information, like we don't force people to give us, we're not a bank, right? So we don't have to force people to give us perfect identifying information. I mean, we need a name, a phone number, an email, just so we can communicate with you as a customer. But what you choose to give us is important. So if I'm subpoenaed, of course, I'll be forced to give over whatever records that I have. But at the end of the day, the Bitcoin that you generate, they're going to your wallet. And if there's a separation between that identifying information and yourself, then they're wild. They're directly off the Bitcoin network. And for me, one of the things that I've noticed about our clients is that they're using their Bitcoin. And I've thought about this a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that when you buy Bitcoin on an exchange, those are surveillance sats. Now, you may not think much about it, but there's a bit of friction. Almost everybody has this experience. If they want to send Bitcoin to a buddy, if they want to buy something with it, they have this little God, there's this little camera sitting on my shoulder that's probably tracking what I'm doing here. I wonder if this is going to bite me in the arse later, right? But when you've generated those sats via mining, people don't think twice about using them, right? They just know that they're off grid. And so for me, I actually think the more Bitcoiners that we get into the mining community, the more that we're going to see the circular economy develop, because people are going to feel the freedom of using their Bitcoin without that surveillance friction.
Hell yeah. I love that so much. That is so much more in alignment, I think, with the ethos of, cypherpunks and the, Satoshi's original vision for what Bitcoin is and can be in the world. And I love that those wild sats go directly to people's wallets. It's not something that you custody, and you don't require all this elaborate KYC. I'm sure that was set up very intentionally. And, I just really have a lot of respect and love and admiration for you for that. And just saying, you know what? These are stats that are meant to be, yeah, like on the down low, right? Like take them, earn them, use them, keep the circular economy. Because without people spending their Bitcoin at some point on whatever's meaningful for them, like this whole thing doesn't have as much power, right? Like circular economies or parallel economies, if you want to look at them that way, that exist alongside the current fiat, system. Like it's important. Like you need to spend your Bitcoin, not all of it, and to whatever degree that's meaningful for you. But I'm very much a promoter and fan of people using their Bitcoin to enhance their lives. In whatever way that seems fit for them. So I really like that. That's a core ethos for you guys is getting wild sats into the hands of people that value them appropriately and then will use them.
Yeah, I think as a Bitcoiner, when I got started with this business model, I just recognized that the most successful businesses in our space were the ones that align themselves as much as possible with the ethos of the Bitcoin network. And so from the start, when we structured this, we said, okay, there's three levers that you have to make money with a business model like this. You either mark up your mining rigs, you mark up your power costs, or you can take a split of the block rewards on the back end. You really have no other choice, right? You either are using electricity, hardware, or the rewards as some way to fund your own business. And so when we looked at it, we said, okay, the only way to do this in a totally aligned way is actually to take a split of the block rewards on the back end and not mark up the hardware, the electricity. Now we suddenly want exactly what our clients want, and so that puts us into a really good position with our clients, because they know that if we're not making their equipment work to the best of the ability of that equipment, that we're not earning either. And so I think that customer alignment has been really critical for our success as a business. We have experienced curtailment in Paraguay that we didn't expect when we first launched there, and that curtailment hit our revenue just the same as it hit our clients' revenue. And I think that our clients gave us a bit more grace because they knew we were being hurt by the same thing that they were. So I think that alignment of incentives is one of the core Bitcoin ethos. But also, as you mentioned, structurally, we don't keep anybody's Bitcoin. We don't custody it. We just require an address to send your Bitcoin to. That's all we need. And that's structurally because I don't ever want to have anybody's Bitcoin. And by you providing an address, I'm sort of removing the whole problem that most Bitcoiners have when they're trying to get their friends and family to get their Bitcoin off an exchange. You're forced to give me a Bitcoin address. You fundamentally have to do that. So there's no exchange like issue where suddenly an exchange is sitting on a big pile of Bitcoin, because I've removed the possibility from that even happening.
And that's where we see a lot of the choke points in Bitcoin, right? Is these big centralized exchanges getting hacked, or having downtime, or having the wrong incentives, and it's not it's just not good stuff. So I really am a fan of the fact that you guys just mine the Bitcoin, send it straight to someone's wallet, and remove yourselves as basically a third party counter risk.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I mean, there is counterparty risk as we're managing something that our clients possess. So it is a high trust relationship. We possess something that our clients own. I said that backwards. But, at the end of the day, there's no way for me to own and manage, or for me to have possession of something that you own and I manage without that being a high trust relationship. But as far as the Bitcoin, though, that's produced from that high trust relationship, no counterparty risk there.
Yeah, and you touched on it briefly, and it's that your incentives are aligned with the incentives of the end user. So that is different than a lot of these other mining companies in a meaningful way, and I think that's going to attract a certain kind of customer. And it sounds like you have a customer base that has a high level of trust for you because your incentives are aligned. So I love that. And earlier we talked a bit about the strategy of being geopolitically decentralized. You're in a few different places, and mining is like a really competitive kind of cutthroat business, right, with a lot of global players chasing cheap power and efficiency. And I just want you to touch on a bit about how you're differentiating yourself in that space, and what have you learned from navigating bear markets or geopolitical shifts like China's mining ban? Like, has that taught you anything about what you need to do differently?
I think it's taught me that the paranoid survive. All right. And so I think that where people have looked at Paraguay and said, oh, that's risky to be in Paraguay. Well, when we went to Paraguay, at the same time, there was a bill on the docket in Texas, of all places. This was after the China ban, to make Bitcoin mining expansion more difficult. So even in a place like Texas, there was at least 2 years ago, there was still jurisdictional risk. And to me, what I've realized is you can't evade jurisdictional risk. I think you will when hyper Bitcoinization occurs, but until that occurs, you've got risk no matter where you choose to mine. And how to mitigate that for me was try to be as distributed as you can across various geographies. There's more risk in a developing geography versus a developed geography, but also kind of try to balance out between those two. So at this point, we've got a good chunk of mining in Norway, a bigger chunk in Paraguay, and a small in the U.S. And because of the distribution, I'm now looking at, hey, how do I expand more in a more developed country, right? I want to kind of balance those out. But I think for me, it was really important to acknowledge that jurisdictional risk and just say, this is just a part of my reality, and how do I manage that? And, how do I mitigate that risk? And for me, that was being in multiple locations, which definitely has its own trade-off. Shipping and logistics is a non-trivial part of my business.
Yeah, shipping to Latin America is notoriously a difficult and annoying thing in and of itself. Yeah, I'm experiencing that getting my bid-axes here right now. They're held up at customs because they don't know what the hell they're looking at. So it's not fun calling them, multiple times a day. Like, it's just Bitcoin mining equipment, it's not a bomb, but they don't know what they're looking at. So it's, I imagine, even crazier for someone in your guys' situation. But
yeah, I got a funny anecdote on that one. So we were just getting live in Norway. This was the end of December, and the mining equipment was being passed across the border of, I think it was Finland and Norway. But the Norwegian border guard there is used to basically seeing fish go across customs, and that's about it. And so they saw the equipment, and it took 2 days of haranguing for them to let it go. And it was the same thing where it's like, oh my gosh, is there something bigger going on here? And no, it was just kind of a customs port of entry in a very remote, obscure location that wanted to sit on it and just, and have their own power dynamics. But I thought it was pretty funny that here these guys are used to seeing basically fish go across their border, and here's all this mining equipment, high-end industrial mining equipment, and we're freaking out a little.
I can imagine you were freaking out with hundreds of thousands of dollars of stuff just held up for observation. And yeah. Oh, well, glad that went through okay. But yeah, I can imagine those were a stressful few days.
It was. It's just funny in hindsight, it's kind of like a Super Trooper sort of moment, right? Where you got these guys that don't know what they're doing. They're just kind of, whatever, what is this? Okay, let's just sit on it. Like, Anyways, it was kind of comical in hindsight. In the moment, you're right, it was stressful, though.
That's exactly what I am picturing in my head at UPS or at the Frontera border here with the bid-axes coming in. They're just unboxing it, and they have no clue what they're looking at, and they're just freaked out by it, so... They want all sorts of proof as to what it is and whatnot. So annoying, but we are in the early infant stages of all of this, right? So it's not surprising.
Yeah, education's part of it.
Yep. Can you speak to, how it's actually like a net positive for humanity's relationship with energy? Sort of like a modern day harnessing of fire. That's the way I see it. To be in Bitcoin mining, and how does Saz Mining's approach challenge the mainstream narrative of Bitcoin mining being super wasteful?
Oh gosh, well, I think I touched on this earlier, right? Miners, well, part of this answer I've touched on earlier, and I think bears repeating, which is that miners want the cheapest electricity possible, and that's electricity. It's produced when nobody wants it or in a place that nobody wants it, and most of the time that is renewable energy. So what I see is the ability to monetize this power that is going to waste is actually an efficiency gain for all of us on the grid. And when I actually play this out, to me, that's kind of level one. Harry Sudduck talks about this. Like, level one is consuming the electricity that is just going to waste right now. And miners are doing a great job of that, scavenging power all over the planet. Level two, though, is when mining is incorporated into new power generation. And to me, that's the part where I actually think society and civilization begins to shift. And what I mean by that is, and now I actually think that within 20 years, we see a resurgence of a homestead-esque type of movement. And we'll call it something else, of course, but it'll be a movement that's centered around somebody's got, let's say a waterfall in a perfect location, no civilization there, but they'll figure out how to generate electricity that they can convert into Bitcoin. And that Bitcoin then will force a bit of a village to pop up around it, or somebody to live there and take care of it. And then that'll beget other sort of businesses. And before long, these, instead of people being congregated around waterways for shipping of goods, like that won't change completely. Our cities aren't going to disband or anything, but what I see is that there's going to be a lot more opportunity for people to move from cities out to power sites that are being used to generate Bitcoin as kind of the basis of a new economic opportunity. And so I actually think that'll be really good for humanity, because I'm convinced that some people should live in cities, people that are deep into culture, art, the arts, these sorts of things. But I think for most humans, they're not really, our biology isn't wired for city life very well. And so having an opportunity to pull us away from cities into a more holistic living environment is going to be good for all of us. So I see Bitcoin, yes, the separation of money and state, and a lot of people talk about that as having dramatic impacts, but I also think the Bitcoin mining is going to have dramatic impacts on our health and happiness as a species.
I love that so much. And that would be an amazing outcome or consequence of all of this, is to bring people back into small communities, self-sustainable communities. And I think a lot of the circular economies that we're seeing now are kind of in alignment with that, right? Like Bitcoin Jungle and all of these, small circular economies popping up. Lots of them in Mexico, lots of them in Africa, and you're seeing it bring communities together. And I think that's going to be an amazing outcome and consequence of Bitcoin mining. So I'm glad that you also, see it that way. So I know you've got a hard stop coming up, so I've got two or three more questions I want to just rip through with you, and then I'll let you get back to your day. So let's touch on Saz Mining's mining as a service. It's hands-off for users. And what's the most surprising feedback you've gotten from your customers, and how has it shaped your thinking about bridging the gap between the technical complexity of mining and mass adoption? And what's been the most rewarding part of what you've built so far?
Most surprising feedback. I would have to say I've not been, and this is based on my own experience. I think, just having utter transparency, not surprising, but the level of transparency that people have been asking for, I think has been a bit surprising. And I understand that too. There's been a lot of bad actors that have run similar business models that have not provided very good transparency. So transparency is trust. And so how much work and effort has been needed to create that transparency for our clients has been a bit surprising to me. The most rewarding has just been people being absolutely gobsmacked that they've generated their own Bitcoin. We see those sort of notes of praise pretty frequently. Just, oh my gosh, I'm making my own Bitcoin straight to my wallet. That's something really rewarding to know that we've helped to empower that Bitcoiner to make their own Bitcoin and to have that experience.
Yeah, beautiful. That must be very powerful and rewarding. When you go to sleep at night, you know that you're contributing to a greater purpose and helping people, potentially in chaotic situations or countries or what have you, mine their own wild sats, and what that could end up doing for their life should they ever need to use it. So that's very awesome. Let's look ahead quickly to the roadmap here for Saz in 2025 and beyond. You've hinted at your plans for focusing on transparency and client experience. Can you give us a peek into what's coming in the year or two ahead, and how do you envision Saz Mining evolving as the hash rate grows and the halving impacts profitability?
Yeah, I think, what I see, the simplest way to describe this is I basically want to take what the pubcos are doing, that business model, and I want to turn it inside out. And what I mean by that is empower everybody down to a single mining rig, to have the capabilities that a big miner has. What I mean by that is I want to empower people to know exactly how much power their rig is consuming, how much hash rate they're generating, what the rewards are, how efficient is their operation, how they can actually sell their equipment, so marketplace, and how they can finance it. And I think if I can create that, me and my team can create that end-to-end experience so that there's the full life cycle that's involved. I think that then our clients will be empowered to run their own operations. I mean, another very gratifying thing that I've seen is our clients have been naturally upgrading their own hash rate, like making their own decisions. They're saying, look, I've been mining on this equipment long enough. I want to resell it. I want to put new equipment in there. Like I've got what I wanted out of that equipment, and now I want to upgrade. And so 80% of our sales are coming from repeat business is an extremely high sign of success for me, because you don't buy a product and service from somebody unless you like what you're receiving.
Yeah, recurring business is amazing. It's the name of the game. I run a Web2 business, and it's the same deal. I've had the majority of my clients for 6 to 7 years, and every once in a while you add in some new ones and keep things moving. But the fact that those same 10, 15 people have stuck with you for 6, 7, 8 years is a huge sign that you're doing something right. So it's awesome that you have an 80% rate of return basically on those customers.
Yeah, and it's also why we don't a lot of Bitcoin community hasn't heard of us, is we haven't had to market ourselves all that hard at this point. I mean, at a certain point we will to scale, but it's been gratifying that we don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing. Word of mouth is working fairly well.
Absolutely. And I think that once you fully develop what you just described of like that full user experience, because selecting the right company to go with, there's, like you said, transparency and trust is huge. It's a lot to overcome for somebody that doesn't have a mining rig. They've never bought into Bitcoin mining, So once you have that full experience built out from the start to the end, even to the reselling and upgrading and that whole hand-holding experience, I think that's going to do a massive good for the company, just to help people on the outside maybe buy their first mining rig and host it with you guys. So that'll do wonders. So let's end with one last question, a deep dive on, it's a bit of a thought experiment. If Bitcoin achieves widespread adoption, say 1 billion users or so, what role do you see mining playing in that world? Could Saz Mining's model of sustainable, decentralized mining influence how society rethinks money, energy, or even power structures?
Yeah, I love this question. And the reason why is because I actually think that Saz Mining, or companies similar to Saz Mining, will play a very important part in that reality. And what I believe will happen is, you've described the hyper-Bitcoinized reality that I think most of us believe will inevitably occur as adoption increases. And in that reality, you're going to have to earn your Bitcoin, not work for fiat and purchase it. And I believe that the exchange-based acquisition model will actually be anachronistic. What I believe is Coinbase was the first to make exchange-based acquisition easy in 2012, and I believe that at a certain point in time there won't be liquidity for your average person to go onto an exchange and buy it. And so the only real approach will then be to acquire it by earning it, and certainly mining it is one of the best ways to earn Bitcoin. And so I actually think that it's not really an exchange service that we offer, not in the least, being a Bitcoin mining company, but it will be a one-way approach to generating your own Bitcoin and cycling fiat through. And I think that might be the only way that people could easily access Bitcoin, other than selling another product and service to acquire it.
Fantastic. Well, Kent, I appreciate all of your time. I had a lot of fun diving deep on your history and your Bitcoin, philosophy and your maximalism. And it's really great to see someone pushing the boundaries of the mining industry and having, aligned incentives. So I hope you had a good time on the show. And, if people want to check you out, all of your links will be in the description. And what would you say to somebody that wants to potentially get their first rig hosted with you? Any lead-ins to that?
Oh, reach out and have a conversation. Just talk, just learn. We're happy to talk with people until they feel comfortable. It's not a decision right away. For most people, if you're ready to go, great, you can do it. Swipe your credit card, get a mining machine. We'll get it going for you. But just start tinkering around the edges. Check us out. Give us a call, book a meeting with one of our customer success associates. But we're happy to help you out on that educational journey, because I think that it's sort of inevitable for most Bitcoiners to get to this point and start mining. And I'm grateful for folks like you, TwoSats, to be allowing me to have an opportunity to talk about some of these things that I care deeply about, and have those shared values, and wish you well in your efforts to continue to mining pill the world here.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. And do you guys accept Bitcoin as a payment or only fiat? Yeah, I thought so. I thought I saw that on the site. So that's awesome. And how great is it that you can actually reach out to these guys and have a one-to-one conversation? I think that's a huge value add that you don't get with a lot of companies. So, a lot of love and respect to you for that. And, just to end it off, I will say that I had an amazing time, digging deep with you, and you've got some great staff. You have some really great staff. I had the pleasure of speaking with Nathan, who helped set this interview up, and extremely, fast to respond, courteous, polite, excited, energetic. I mean, you don't get that everywhere. So just wanted to give some love to you and your team on that front, and, keep doing what you're doing, guys. And we'll have all the links in the description. Highly suggest you reach out and have a talk with Kent and his team if you're considering getting a mining as a service operation going. And who better to host it with and get some wild sats? Thanks, Kent.
Thank you, TwoSats.